As our community reopens, residents and visitors are reminded not to let down their guard. The best way to prevent an increase in new COVID-19 cases is for everyone to follow these simple guidelines. If you own or operate a business, follow the requirements outlined in the emergency orders. Maintain social distance, stay at least 6 feet from others, avoid large groups, and stay home if you are sick. Wear a facial covering when out in public. This protects you and others, especially those most vulnerable, like the elderly and those with underlying medical conditions. Report business violations anonymously online at mybroward.broward.org or by calling 311. Finally, maintain good personal hygiene and avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, especially after touching public surfaces. We fought this virus together, and together we can help ensure a safe recovery. For more information, visit broward.org/coronavirus.
is the time for everyone in Broward County to be vigilant in helping to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. If you are sick, please stay home. Avoid close contact with anyone showing respiratory symptoms. Avoid directly touching public surfaces like handrails or gasoline pumps. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water for at least 20 seconds and use hand sanitizers that contain more than 60% alcohol. Cough and sneeze into a tissue or your elbow. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Avoid large crowds. When out in public, keep at least 6 feet between you and others. Finally, keep calm and try to maintain a healthy lifestyle. For more information, visit floridahealth.gov.
As our community reopens, residents and visitors are reminded not to let down their guard. The best way to prevent an increase in new COVID-19 cases is for everyone to follow these simple guidelines. If you own or operate a business, follow the requirements outlined in the emergency orders. Maintain social distance, stay at least 6 feet from others, avoid large groups, and stay home if you are sick. Wear a facial covering when out in public. This protects you and others, especially those most vulnerable, like the elderly and those with underlying medical conditions. Report business violations anonymously online at mybroward.broward.org or by calling 311. Finally, maintain good personal hygiene and avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth, especially after touching public surfaces. We fought this virus together, and together we can help ensure a safe recovery. For more information, visit broward.org/coronavirus.
You are deliberate.
Okay,
Deliberately slow or what?
So did that come, is it up? I don't know. Are we good? Are we good, guys? Ladies? Gentlemen? Comcast got us?
I think everybody should be wearing a mask in this dais. Hey, Bertha, we need to call the sheriff's office. We have people here that are violating your executive order. They're purposely violating your executive order here.
This day is entirely too crowded.
Thank you. Do we have more? Please.
Commissioner Rich.
Yes?
Commissioner Rich is on the phone.
Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 6. Okay, we have a quorum.
So do you wish for me to open the bridge?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is Broward County Board of County Commissioners meeting of June 2nd. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing after. We'll have our pledge led by Commissioner Bogan.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America.
I guess my mask is wearing out.
Is that soothing music during the pledge? I mean, I guess.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is customary that we observe a moment of silence in honor of notable persons from our community who have recently passed. Colleagues, does anyone have anyone that they want to remember? Commissioner Furr.
Thank you, Mayor. Today we remember George Floyd and all the George Floyds over the decades. The names are too long to list. And as we're remembering, we should take the time to listen. Listen to the other accounts and stories that didn't make the news. George Floyd was a spark in a country full of dry kindling from a pandemic exposing the inequities of our society to the worst economy of our lifetime. George Floyd became a spark. And people are marching in over 100 cities, in Berlin, in New Zealand, all over the world. James Baldwin said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." And for that, I think we should all be remembering George Floyd today.
Okay. No one else online? Okay, let me do two. I have distinguished VIP intern, Justin Porter. He's been with me now for several months, graduate of Dartmouth College. He's with me because the job opportunity he thought he had didn't come true. Sadly, young Mr. Porter lost his father this past weekend, Craig Michael Porter Sr., his dad. Please keep Justin and his family in your thoughts and prayers. We are at a very crucial, critical point in our nation's history. When the events of this past week lay bare deep wounds that goes back 400 plus years. Unfortunately, as a society, we haven't come to grips with the deep inequities that exist within our nation. What we see is a manifestation of anger, frustration, and even some bitterness. But as a great nation, we have come a long way. We cannot ignore the facts. And as leaders, we have an obligation to this country to make it better than it is, because we can. It's been a great nation. We've led in many ways. But we still have a distance to go to create a more perfect union. There's a lot of tension even within me. And I can tell you that I have experienced the sadness of rough treatment by our police force right here in Broward County. As an 18-year-old student at Broward College, I drove my car to a store, and on my way back, I thought I'd stop to see my friend over in Lauderdale Lakes in Eastgate. There's a Circle K at 441 and 23rd Street. I pulled in. Thought I'd call to see whether or not my friend Chris, who and I were at Broward College at the time, could spend a couple of minutes talking about some school stuff. And stopped, put a coin in the payphone, made a call. BSO was called. 2 officers came. 1 black, 1 white. The white officer came over and says, "I'm told you've been casing the place, that you're pretending to be on the phone. You didn't put a coin in." I says, "My friend's on the phone. I was just trying to visit." You can talk to him, and I don't know how to make a phone call without putting a coin in. He grabbed the phone away from me, went, talked to Chris, and I thought that would be okay. But then he grabbed me, pushed me towards the car, pushed me up against the car. And really, I'm even nervous now. Really was abusive. Searched through my dad's car. And what was sad for me was the black officer on the other side just stood there like this, did nothing. Now that's nothing compared to what we experienced with Mr. Floyd. But that gives you part of the symptom that then fester to get to where we saw with Mr. George Floyd. We need healing in our country, but we cannot heal unless we acknowledge where we are. And not just merely acknowledge it, but every one of us, and especially those who are in power, those who have wealth, those who are privileged, to not just talk about it, to not just join a march or to get on a Zoom call, but to be purposeful in bringing about fairness and justice. Because if we do so, all of us will be better for it. Anyone else?
Mayor, I want to add something. Last year when I was mayor, you may remember, Mayor, and this commissioners may remember, an officer jumped on some kid from high school. They were having a fight in the McDonald's parking lot, and an officer jumped on the kid and tried to smash his face in the ground. And I came out and called for that officer after watching the video to be fired. And the police union criticized me, you know, that officer needs due process, and you don't know all the facts. And then there was a video of an officer, a guy was handcuffed to a hospital bed, and this guy was, you know, loud and stuff, and the officer told the guy to be quiet, and the guy wouldn't be quiet, and the officer punches him in the face. Just punches him in the face, thinks he can get away with it, calls for that guy to be fired. Again, the police union comes out and criticizes that, and I didn't hear a lot of elected officials come out and say that, you know, and my point is that in every profession there's bad lawyers, there's bad doctors, there's bad police, and there are a few, and we should be advocating to get rid of the bad apples, because everyone else is good. And I think nothing's going to change until we change our laws. And we can sit here and talk, but you know, there's a Bill of Rights that officers have, that you can't do anything to them without, you know, even if it's clear as day, they do something, and we have to do something to get rid of just the bad apples. And it's sad that the union won't join in saying, hey, we have a bad apple. We need to get rid of a bad apple. Everyone else, 99% of these officers are good people, and 99% of them do a great job. But the 1%, we need to come out and talk about and talk about getting rid of them. And the sheriff can tell you, who's sitting right here, can tell you, I called him up and said, Sheriff, I hope that we can get rid of our bad apples. And they had to go through a due process because the law requires that. But I just think that there's more to do than talking. I think we need to look at our laws.
We will be discussing that more.
Commissioner Bogan's microphone is on. We cannot hear him.
There's an item that I have that we will address those changes and those things that we need to do. So if we just do the moment of silence and acknowledge the passing. Yes.
Mayor, I know that prayer might not be allowed. I just want to ask that whatever God we worship, that we pray as leaders to fill our hearts with love and compassion and healing. Not only healing for COVID, but heal this world from its hatred and from what we're continually witnessing. So I'm just asking all of us again to pray for healing, for love in our hearts. Thank you.
Mayor?
So I'm just going to keep this focused on our prayer for our community. My prayer for our community is that we continue to work together for peace. I pray that the businesses that were damaged during this are restored. We've had so many of our long-term businesses here in within the vicinity of Andrews, and Marshy, and Los Olas have damage during this time. And I just want everyone to understand that we are praying for peace. We are praying for peaceful protests, and we are praying for the safety of all of our residents in our community. We pray that the rights that our forefathers have and ancestors had fought so hard for would continue to be uplifted and restored. And that faith has to be restored in our community by all of us working together. And so that would be my prayer for today and for my moment of silence. We pray for restoration and peace, restoration of our small businesses here in Broward, and peace for our community. Thank you.
Commissioner Ryan. Did I hear you?
Before I speak, I think that, okay, it was, go ahead. The technician had walked around and turned everybody's mic on, but everybody's mic's supposed to be off unless you're speaking, except for the mayor. I remember reading a quote by Martin Luther King that said, a riot is a sign of a people who have not been heard. And so my prayer is that through all of this tragedy, that there begins to be a greater dialogue and discussion about equality, not just in the law, but in the reality of the interactions between the public and law enforcement authorities, and all of the institutions of governance. That is my prayer for this morning.
Okay. Thank you. Let us also honor all the brave men and women who have served and continue to serve in our armed forces, both here and abroad, and thank them for their service. And let's also honor all our first responders and frontline medical personnel who have dealt with this COVID-19. A movement of silence, please. Please take your seats. Okay, I do have to promote social distancing and avoid risk of additional community spread. This commission meeting is not open to physical attendance by members of the public, the media, or general county staff. Only county commission, those county employees required to attend the event at the express direction of the county administrator, county attorney, county auditor may be physically present at this meeting. In order to reduce the risk created by gathering in person and underscore the consistent guidelines issued by governmental entities, including the CDC in this county, some of our commissioners have agreed to stay home, and as you notice, we are spread out. Members of the public wishing to speak on an item on the agenda may do so by signing up on the county website at registertospeakbroward.org, registertospeakbroward.org. The link is being displayed on your screen now. To utilize this public participation option following the instructions on the website, you must have access to internet, a working email address, and a telephone. You may be able to sign up until 10:30 a.m. this morning. Today's music was selected by Commissioner Farr, A Change, Gonna Come by Sam Cooke, and I'll Take You There by the Staple Sisters. We have no presentation, we have no proclamation this morning, but we have a presentation, item 62. We should have taken that up at 10:10. We have a 10:15 time certain. We're running behind, as you can tell.
We did.
So we're going to move quickly to on the morning memo, and then we'll do quick polls and try to get on track. The following requests are submitted for your consideration. Consent items are 1 through 45, public hearing 46 through 53, regular items 54 through 63. I request the following withdrawals, scrivener's errors, and inclusion of additional materials. Item 11, withdrawn for further staff review. Item 57, deferred to June 16, 2020, due to extended power outage that impacted the Oversight Board's meeting of May 22nd, 2020. The original items language will be amended to allow County Commission action on both capital projects and rehabilitation and maintenance projects recommendations prior to the board's summer break. Scrivener's errors, item 38, motion currently shows Commissioner District 2, should be Commission District 4. Without objection, I request the following items be moved to consent, 54, 55, and 56. Item 37, the board's consideration is based on the item as revised by the replacement pages distributed as additional material. Item 62, time certain 1010 FAA presentation, time certain 1015. Item 63, time certain 1030 public hearing items 51 and 52, time certain at 11:30. The COVID update will take place after the regular portion of the agenda. Item 54, contingent on board's approval of the board revised local preference ordinance, agenda item number 50, prior to advertisement of the request for proposal, RFP number PNC 21204-415P1, Port Everglades Bulkhead Replacement Project, Group 1. The local vendor certification form included in the RFP will be replaced with a form that is consistent with the new ordinance requirements. Additional material for regular meeting. Presentation FAA Metroplex project. Item number 8, memo to the board from county administration. Item number 20, replacement exhibit 1 submitted by EPGM. Item 28, memo to the board from finance and administrative services department. Item 37, replacement page 2 and 3, exhibit 2 submitted by, yeah, I did that. Item number 50, proposed amendment submitted by Mayor Holness. Item 52-2, proposed amendment submitted by Commissioner Furr. Item 53, application for environmental resource general license submitted by Commissioner Fisher. Item 56, memo to the board from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Item 58, parking garage submitted by Commissioner Bogan. Now, if I may go around and get your pulls, please. We'll start with you, Commissioner Fisher.
I have no pulls, Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Sharif.
No pulls, Mayor.
Commissioner Udine.
Item number 34 for an abstention only, Mayor.
Commissioner Bogan.
Item number 8.
Commissioner Ryan.
Item number 8.
Commissioner Furr.
Item number 8 and 56 for recusal.
Uh,
Got a full house.
Vice Mayor Geller.
None, Mayor. None, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Rich.
Item 20 for an abstention.
Okay, with that, County Attorney, would you read the consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor.
I'm sorry, thank you very much. Any pulls from the public? None? Okay. County Attorney.
Yes, Mayor. The consent agenda is items 1 through 45. Deleted from that is item 8. Also, item 11, which has been withdrawn, and item 34 for an abstention. And then added to the consent agenda appears to be item 54 and 55. Item 20 is also deleted from that for an abstention. So 20, 34, and 56 have abstentions.
Okay. May I have a motion?
I'll move the consent. Second.
A motion and a second. Those in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, nay? Okay, passes unanimously. Now we go on to presentation from our friends from Taiwan. If I could have Council Director General David K.C. Chen and Director Sarah Chen from the Taiwanese government in Florida to make a presentation to us. Would you come forward, please? And you can stand at the podium.
Thank you. And Mayor Holness, commissioners, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great pleasure to be here with you today. Yeah, as we know that the pandemic COVID-19 is the human beings crisis globally. And as of today, we learned that there are more than 55,000 cases, confirmed cases in Florida. And, sorry, may I take it? Yeah. And more than 2,400 days from this pandemic. We mourn alongside those who have lost their loved ones, and we send our prayers for the recovery of all who are still sick. United States is Taiwan's great partner, both in security and in economy. And Florida is Taiwan's sister state. And there are tens of thousands of Taiwanese calling Broward County their homes. Taiwan it's willing and great to help its international partners and friends. As we know, virus knows no boundary. We have to collaborate together to combat this virus. Therefore, on behalf of the Taipei Economic Cultural Office in Miami, which represents the interests of Taiwan, I'm going to donate 10,000 face masks to Broward County government. We hope those masks could help our frontline responders to combat the normal coronavirus, and we sincerely hope the pandemic will be quelled and our life will go on track as soon as possible. Thank you very much, and I wish you good health, safety, and happiness. Thank you.
That is item 62, and I believe we need to have a motion to accept.
Second.
Those in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Those opposed,
Aye.
nay. Okay, so it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And if you come forward.
All right.
And I guess we gotta try to do some social distancing, but if you could come forward, stand here. Behind the,
out, the better they can do white.
yeah, so if you stand right behind the box, I think.
All right.
That would be a good shot. And did you want Sarah to come up also, or she can take the photos?
Ryan, stay with me.
No, I can come in.
Okay, and if we can take a, yes.
Okay, you with a mask. Come on. Who's taking the picture?
Put a mask on. I don't feel good.
Just shut up.
Okay. Okay.
I'm smiling.
Yes.
You got everyone? Okay, good. Okay.
Come on in here, Barbara.
Barbara needs a different.
2-1.
Big smile.
Thank you.
All right, good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. We've been working together, especially in FITSE for many years. Thanks so much for your support over the years for that event. We'll now move on to a presentation from Federal Aviation Administration, Mr. Michael O'Hara, Federal Aviation Administrator, Regional Administrator of Southern Region. Christian Carnes, Federal Aviation Administration, South Central Florida, Metroplex co-lead. James Ari, Federal Aviation Administration, Metroplex Program Manager. We have a presentation. It's up, okay, good. It's up on our screen.
Okay, good morning.
Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Mayor Holness and to the entire Board of County Commissioners. This is Michael O'Hara, the Regional Administrator. As you mentioned, I'm joined by Jim Origi and Christian Carnes. We want to take 10 minutes this morning. I believe we're allocated to give a quick update on what this project is about. Some of you may recall our visits and engagement with the community last year around this time. We'll share why the FAA is doing this project and how and when we continue to engage with the public. I think I need to ask someone to advance slides. We could just go to the second slide. If
Okay.
you could confirm you're able to see those.
Yes, you're on. Next, we're on slide. The
Very good. Very good. So what is the South Central Florida Metroplex? This is a project, one of 11 across the country. It's a comprehensive proposal to improve the flow of air traffic into and out of Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International, but 20 other airports by making the airspace safer and more efficient. Florida is the only state in the country that has 4 major international airports, and the airspace and efficient movement of Florida is vital to the operation there, not only in Florida, but throughout the system. And this project proposes to add satellite-based procedures, which are more efficient and safer than our existing procedures in South Florida that have been in place for several years. On the next slide, there's some benefits. All of the routes that we're that our design team has been working comply with current noise abatement procedures, but we're working to modernize the procedures to today's standards in the airspace above Florida, much like we would upgrade other transportation infrastructure. These improvements will enhance safety and efficiency by giving us more precise aircraft locations, by giving us increased predictability of those operations that help us separate air traffic routes, decongest airports and routes into those airports that are in close proximity, and by helping passengers by reducing delays. Also important is the fact that we are able to reduce the complexity of communication between air traffic controllers and pilots as they have established routes, altitudes, directions inherently built in. So we have the controllers and pilots and the aircraft on the same sheet of music, if you will. So on the next slide, gives an overview of the process. This project began many years ago. We issued the draft environmental assessment and made a notice of availability of that on May 11th. That opened an extended 60-day public comment period that closes on July 10th. And I will share a little bit more about public workshops that are upcoming. Our plans are to make a final environmental decision this fall and hopefully move into the final steps of implementation, but we will not implement the project until we review and assess public comments that come in during this comment period, and we would not make any changes until next spring or summer at the earliest. The next slide talks about the proposed action. There are no ground disturbance associated with this. These are airspace and procedure changes. It does not increase the number of aircraft operations within the study area, which is roughly the southern half of the state of Florida. Our environmental analysis conducted in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act indicates that this project will not result in any significant noise impacts using the definition of significant in NEPA, and no reportable noise impacts to the population throughout the study area. When you look at forecast levels of traffic, both in 2021, which would be the first year the procedures could be in place, or in 2026, there are no significant environmental impacts in any of the other 13 resource categories that were assessed. This project allows us to incorporate optimized profile descents into the airspace in Florida that should allow us to keep flights at or above the altitude seen today. We have departures that allow us to have precision RNAV routes off the ground that helps eliminate wind drift that can move aircraft over specific noise-sensitive areas near the airport. So there's some specific language there about our benefits, both in general as well as specific in the area. The next slide talks about our public engagement. Last year, as I mentioned, we held 4 workshops in the Fort Lauderdale area, and this year we're holding 12 virtual public workshops across South and Central Florida, including 3 that will focus on Fort Lauderdale, and those are June 9th at noon, June 10th at 3 p.m., and June 11th at 6 p.m. Those live online meetings have been built to replicate what the public receives in an in-person workshop, where they can come through our lobby area, they can register, they have information to preview before we go live, and then we'll have our environmental and local air traffic controllers there from Fort Lauderdale prepared to engage with the public with a live question and answer to ensure that they understand the environmental assessment findings and that they also have an opportunity to ask questions. They can leave comments with us, or they can turn those in online or via email. We're working with news media as well as reaching out across the state to 800 elected officials. We've shared information through our social media and flyers made available. We'll have a heavy push in the media outlets in the Miami and Fort Lauderdale areas beginning this Friday, in addition to the other avenues that I've mentioned. The workshops will be they'll be recorded, so they can be played back if any members of the public are unable to attend the various times that we're offering. And we have met the requirements by sending that notice of availability out to the public in the newspapers, as well as elected officials and 117 libraries across the state. The next slide is an example of the information that's available on FloridaMetroplexWorkshops.com, and where you can register for these workshops. And as we get into the live workshops next week, again, the public will be able to see information on the project background, a number of videos about the project. They'll be able to see some flight procedure boards that I'll show on the next couple of slides quickly. They can do a street level, address level noise analysis that looks at what their existing noise is from aviation flights and how that compares with the proposed project. They can provide comments, get technical support, and also then join the live workshop either through Zoom, Facebook Live, YouTube, or they can dial in on a phone and listen in and text questions in to us. So I'll go really briefly through the next 4 slides, but they show examples of this project similar to information you saw last year. The first slide shows eastbound departures, and that shows the procedures off the ground in purple, and the other tracks or the thinner lines show historic tracks. In this particular example, you can see that the tracks are headed out over the ocean. They're approaching 10,000 feet as they turn back over the shoreline north of Fort Lauderdale. On the next slide, you'll see the westbound departures. And again, there's a precision capability on these that allows us to eliminate some of the wind drift, for example, in places like Lauderdale Isles, and keep the departures heading out from the north runway south of 595, just as a specific example. But you'll see how the tracks are aligned with the backbone of existing noise tracks through the county. The next slide shows our east arrivals. It's a little bit of a different view here. You can see a couple of altitudes that are spelled out and how the procedures terminate near the middle of the slide at a point called Waynar at 5,000 feet. And then they have what we call a splay of tracks where, depending on traffic turning on to that final approach into the airport, aircraft will make that turn as they do today and distribute that noise when you're in this east arrival configuration. So you can see the altitudes and the proposals on this slide. And then the very last slide is the west arrivals, again showing aircraft going out over the coast at 6,000 feet, making the turn over the ocean back into the runways at Fort Lauderdale on the final approach. The next slide shows an example of the noise analysis that I touched on. In this particular case, it shows no change in the noise levels around the 52 decibel range, which is calculated taking into account the intensity of the noise, the frequency of noise, and then weighting it by a factor of 10 for nighttime operations. So it's an established day-night level DNL analysis, but the public can look at 117,000 dots across the state of Florida if they want, and pick one of those or around their community and see that analysis. That'll be available in the lobby as well as live in the workshop, and we can answer any questions about those boards or procedures. The next slide talks about the public comment period. Again, I mentioned the dates of May 11th, closing on July 10th, with capabilities to submit online, through the mail, or via email. And then I think our very last slide shows a flyer that we distributed to elected officials, as well as every major airport in Florida has information on the workshops on their website. We're sharing this with media as well. So workshop dates and website locations where the public can learn more about the project. So I believe that's my allocated time. I have the contact information for myself on the very last slide, and I will hold there for questions. Thank you.
We have a question for you, sir, from Commissioner Tim Ryan.
Mr. O'Hara, thank you for that presentation. And I believe it's just somewhat fortuitous that we're having this South Central Florida Metroplex study done at the same time that we are completing the 150 study at the airport. So you mentioned that there are 4 major airports in the state of Florida. I assume you're talking Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, and Tampa. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So Broward County is unique because we are going through the process with the expansion of the south runway, that we had to really kind of adjust some of the flights as much as possible, the flight paths, to accommodate the residential neighborhoods. I represent the area where the airport is and the surrounding areas, north, south, east, and west, and in particular over at Lauderdale Isles. You mentioned that neighborhood by name, so you're familiar with some of their issues, that on westbound departures, if there's a turn to the north too quickly, that it goes over a long-established neighborhood. And really the airport, the Fort Lauderdale Airport, had a large expansion in the number of flights beginning in the 1980s, and it's just gone really unabated. It's been a great expansion, and many of these residential neighborhoods were already established before this increase in flight. So your sensitivity in how you determine the altitudes and the path drift are important to a lot of people that are not in that, like 60 decibel noise contour area. But as soon as you get out of that area, not too far, maybe just, a couple hundred yards, you're into some densely populated neighborhoods. So I appreciate the efforts that you're making to minimize the noise impact. You said that was one of your objectives, including an optimized profile descent to keep the planes at an altitude at or above what is expected on the descent because of that noise. So I thank you for your attention to this. I know it's a large task, and the public is grateful for your input on this, Mr. O'Hare.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan.
Okay. And let me also thank you for the presentation you shared with us, which is pretty much the same presentation in the past, and allow for input this past week. There was some good comments from Mayor Sturmer, from Weston. Thank you for keeping us informed and abreast of what's going on. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we're 15 minutes behind. We're going to go ahead into item number 62. Is that 62? Let's 63. Item 63. I have the sheriff here, and I want to make sure we're able to cover. So we have a presentation. Are we ready, staff, to put that up? And what we'll do is we'll give you a copy also of this hard copy. We kind of put this together yesterday. I just wanted to get us to really start thinking about what we can do. And in doing so, I believe we ought to at least get some idea where we are. Now, what I'm presenting is a part of the picture, not the entire picture, but I think we ought to look to see what are some of the statistics that we're faced with in terms of inequity in Broward County and a little bit in the state. So, can be looking back. Can we get it on the monitors in front of us? So the Tampa Bay Tribune did some study a couple of years ago, and it showed that if you're black, and let's say you're an 18-year-old and you're shoplifted and you go before a judge, and an 18-year-old white person go before a judge. If you go before a white judge, you'll get an average of 20% longer sentence for the same crime, even if you've got the same background, except for your color. That's an issue for us. And with that also comes what I think is a great deal of over-policing. Black youths are arrested 5 times more. I've seen statistics that says in Broward County it's as high as 75%. What I have documented is 65% of those children who are arrested in Broward County are black. Longer prison sentence. Black motorists are stopped for not wearing a seatbelt in Broward County, 1.9 times more likely if I'm driving than any of you guys here driving. I'm likely to stop almost twice for simply not wearing a seatbelt. The number of Broward judges is small, and it is across the state. When you look across the state, 7% of the judges are black. In Broward County, we have a little bit better percentage, maybe about 11, 12%. Where blacks are 30% of the population here. If we know that these inequities that exist in our judicial system, shouldn't we be looking to put more black judges on so that they can be fairer, more balanced sentences? We should. So part of what I think we need to do is to really expose these disparities, especially in the criminal justice system, and improve judicial representation. Expand civil citation programs, and thanks to you, we passed the adult civil citation programs. But here's the problem, colleagues. Check with your cities. How many of your cities are utilizing this tool? They find every excuse not to. And yet, the fact is proven that this system works better than arresting people for minor offenses, minor misdemeanor offenses. When we arrest someone for shoplifting $50 or $100 of stuff, and we put them in jail at $161 per night and offer a bail of even $100. They didn't have $50 to begin with. Where are they going to find 100? So guess what? You and I are paying for that person to be incarcerated or to be held in jail. The civil citation for juveniles. We've had that around for a while, and the county is a department that does a stellar job. I must compliment those who handle the civil citation program for juveniles and the adult civil citation. What we find is this: there's more than a 90% success rate. Documentation shows we've saved taxpayers of Broward County over $14 million. Doesn't it make sense for us to do that? Why aren't we doing more of it? Every police department in Broward County should embrace that. All the elected officials should be leading the charge to ensure that all of your cities are doing that. We lock a kid up for having alcohol because he's under age. He can't go to college. He can't serve in the armed forces. Can't get a job. What are we doing? It's stupid. We're smarter than that. Someone's caught with a small amount of marijuana, and God knows a whole bunch of people have smoked a little bit at some point in time. Imagine you get caught for that. No, we've decriminalized it. And we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in jail. Lost lives. Homelessness. And I found out yesterday that black males is the largest percentage of homeless people in Broward County. But when you saddle folks with this stuff, what do you expect? Can't get anything different. So we need to support law enforcement training programs targeted racial bias, and it exists. The sheriff will speak to that in a little bit. If I can go on to some more of the statistics. 55% of convictions, this is in Broward County, were black people. We're 30% of the population. And this is from Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Criminal Justice Data Transparency Dashboard. Florida Department of Juvenile Justice shows that in 2019, 65% of youth arrested in Broward County were black. 65%. 50% of countywide arrests were blacks. And again, 30%. That's 2018. 2017, in a letter from the Public Defender's Office, they found that 86% of inmates were pretrial detainees. That's those we hold in our jail, and they're too poor to post a bond. Talked about us being 1.9 times more likely to be stopped if you're black. Blacks make up 15.4% of Florida's population, yet they make up 49% of the people in prison in Florida. Black employment rate is 2 times higher than whites. It's the Economic Policy Institute. Black household income is 61% less than whites. State of work in America. White families have 10 times the net worth of black families. The gap continues. I'm going to have, and let me do this one other slide and have the sheriff come up and speak to the criminal justice side of things. So no wonder why in Broward County, black household income is $42,000, Hispanic $54,000, white $74,000. Sheriff Tony, would you come forward and I don't know, County Administrator, we have a groundwater program that I'd love for Ms. Campbell, if possible, or someone from her staff to give us a little background on that after the sheriff speak to this, because he's actually, last meeting we agreed to expand our contract to $700,000 because the sheriff's putting $500,000 into the program that we've started here in Broward County, led by our Human Services Department. Sheriff Turney.
The workshops on racial sensitivity.
Yeah, but it's more than that. It's extended, and I like when we finish this discussion that we come out of here with some thoughts and ideas of concrete things that this government can do. I have a couple that we should be looking to do to change the dynamics. Because if we don't take action, nothing changes. Sheriff Tony.
Yes, sir. Mayor, Commissioners, thanks for inviting me in today to speak on this issue. I'll speak really quickly about the sentiments, what's been going on across this entire country and my perspective on it. We are at a point in time in American history where we've taken a jump back to 1960. And it happened as a byproduct of failed action for decades. Much of the conversation that we're having about inequality and unfairnesses that has plagued and been very a disadvantage for African Americans in this country is just showing on the surface again. We have not acted as a country, nor have we acted as a county in a very aggressive manner to take on these challenges. And it has been echoed across the country for every time I've spoke to another administrator in this profession, for every time I've heard from an elected official, is that we want to put forth prayers. And I'm a God-fearing man. I grew up in a Christian household, and prayers are vital. But more vital than that is actions. And we have an opportunity here to take advantage of another tragic death and put forth things that make sense. I'm uniquely qualified to speak on these issues. I have grown up in the inner cities of Philadelphia, survived armed home invasions, watched friends of mine being gunned down, and I used what I had to make it out of there, which was athleticism. And I had always excelled at being an athlete. But even getting past the crimes in the community, I still had to face the prejudice and bias of the law enforcement officers that were there to serve the community. And what I witnessed with Mr. Floyd's murder was something I personally experienced in my life. I've been that kid tossed against the ground with a knee on his neck. I know what it feels like to fight for your life, every grasp of air, and hope that somebody will show and demonstrate humility. And I was fortunate to survive it, and I'm here today. And I was brought into this organization to rectify deficiencies related to mass casualty preparedness, active shooter, and we don't have to relive that moment. But what I would tell you as the chief administrator of this agency in this county, when it comes to law enforcement, we had to do more to make sure we minimize any type of harm that would take place to our African American community for sake of police brutality, misunderstanding, and we have been very aggressive in that. Mark, you mentioned that we've had conversations about police brutality and what actions would take place. And I can tell you, having been appointed in January of 2019, come February 2019, we were already putting things in place to help minimize what we've seen in Minneapolis happen here in Broward County. The first step that we enacted was to introduce an early warning system into our agency so that we can track and monitor those deputies who were exhibiting signs of they were on the lines of creating some conflict, being too excessive or too abusive. This agency never had that. That's been in place since February 2019. And what that allows is for our administrators is to catch it early. To catch it early before it turns to a point where we take someone's life. The other side that needed to be rectified was we implemented something called a use of force review board, where now we have a group of individuals in our agency who are subject matter experts in defensive tactics and police protocols on how we are supposed to engage with people when it comes to a physical altercation. That affords us an opportunity to catch these incidents in every single one of my districts before it turns into someone losing their life. But I had to do more. I looked at our professional standards committee, which has been around for over 30 years, and the intent behind that commission or that committee was to provide objectivity and fairness in how we are going to institute discipline based on fact finding that what has occurred from an internal affairs investigation and then presented amongst a group that will be comprised of both law enforcement and civilians from this community. And I'll tell you that professional standards committee was fell in this community. We had an incident that Mark, you spoke on, where one of our deputies had struck an individual in handcuffs. And that professional standards committee said, hey, we'll just suspend him for a few days. And I had to go against the grain and terminate that employee. We had the incident involving DeLuca Road, the young man that you spoke of, where his face was slammed down into the ground. And that too was recommended as an exonerated act with allowing no discipline to be taking place against the deputies involved. And I knew then, what I know very much now, is that if I didn't have the courage to go against the grain and hold him accountable, Minneapolis would have been Broward County months ago. And this place would have burned. And we've taken these aggressive actions and it brought forth conflict. I have to fight my union now, at least union representatives. But if we are going to be an agency of justice, if we're going to be an agency of fairness, then it's going to start with accountability. And we have to make tough decisions. But I've shared this with some of you privately on the phone. I've talked to some of our residents here. It's not about keep terminating people. I'm willing to terminate every single corrupt employee that walks in this agency. I won't hesitate to do it. But that is a retroactive response to harm that has already happened in the community. We can't keep waiting for bad things to happen to be responsive. And so, to what the commissioner, to what the mayor had talked about, I looked at what was offered here years ago, was the inclusion of implementing this racial equity and implicit bias training into this organization, into the sheriff's office. And it was minuscule what the request was. And I put forth and jumped out and said, why should we be included? This agency should be leading it. We have the greatest civilian contact than any other organization in this county. We have fire rescue, we have law enforcement. Our interactions are greater. And so we shouldn't be included in this process. We should be leading it for the entire county. $500,000 goes towards this project now. And the idea is to make sure that we mandate this sensitivity training for every single deputy, including the community inside, to get involved in this activity. Between those checks and balances that we put in place, it's a good start. It's a good start. But we are so far away from doing everything else we can do for this county. I am responsible for the public safety and security for roughly half of our cities, but what about the other half? What are those cities doing to mirror the activities we are doing here at the Broward Sheriff's Office so that we are consistent across this county? That is my challenge to my municipals. Are they going to align themselves and join us in this effort? Because we can do only so much for BSO territories, but what about the other municipals where kids walk through and these conflicts are stirring up? We just learned a very hard lesson, and that what takes place in one part of our city impacts this entire county. The protest was positive, it worked well, but agitators decide to create havoc and conflict, and we saw damage in our properties in Fort Lauderdale. We've seen things that we were hoping to deter from and keep from happening. So that easily is a reminder that every single city needs to get on board with some of the things that we are putting in place. I would also expand in that we need to do more in a sense of community outreach and youth development programs specifically for the minority communities that suffer the most, that doesn't have the opportunities. We can't limit young people's dreams to being basketball players, football players, or baseball players. At some point, everyone's going pro, whether it be a professional doctor, lawyer, or attorney. But we don't have those opportunities injected both from financial resources or leadership into the minority communities that need it the most. And so I roughly have $1 billion operating budget that you all present for us to safeguard this community. Education is part of safety. Opportunities is part of safety. If you get these people, these young folks, opportunities to stay off the street, to engage in a positive outlook, then it's going to help us reduce, sir, the inmate populations that we have in our jails. It's going to give us an opportunity to reduce the volume of miscellaneous arrests that continue to occur in this entire county. You all put forth this civil citation program, and it was a great idea, great concept, but it has not been executed and pushed out into this county in a manner that would really impact the numbers and figures that we are seeing with the amount of people that are being arrested. I've learned something with this COVID-19 crisis that we are still battling and fighting. Our inmate population dropped down to roughly 63%, the lowest it's ever been, because people were complying, and also that law enforcement officers were encouraged by every single chief administrator in this county. We had teleconference, we encouraged our men and women to not make miscellaneous arrests and issue out citations and provide notice to appears for sake of a crisis. We're still in a crisis outside of COVID-19 when it comes to the disproportionate arrest of minorities in this country. It doesn't stop with COVID-19. And if we can drop that inmate population down to 63, 64%, why can't we do that all year long, despite the virus? And so we're looking at a lot of different elements to introduce into this county, into this community, but it's going to take a village once again. And you all have a tremendous amount of power and authority to help support the efforts that we are taking on at the Sheriff's Office. You have a voice. You can engage with your other elected officials and get them on board with some of the things that we are doing. I know I went a little bit long, but as I said before, this is something that I have personally lived in my life, and yet I've been able to arrive here. And I'm obligated to speak on these things, and more so I'm obligated to act. I'll pray with you, but I'm going to act, and that's what I encourage this commission, is to act with me. And I'll take any questions if you have it.
Commissioner Bogan. First of all, Sheriff, I want to thank you for not only everything you're doing, but last year when I did call you and speak to you about what I felt were injustices, I appreciate you taking my calls, appreciate, I understood that everyone's entitled to due process. And, I thank you for being receptive and for listening to the concerns I had and taking action at what you did.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Ryan.
Before you made your remarks, Sheriff, Mayor Holness had kind of challenged us to come up with our ideas on how we might also participate in a dialogue that can bring about, I think, greater racial sensitivity in this county. I mean, I believe we're kind of above the curve on this, but there's always room for improvement. And what I've said before is I was actually surprised, what had occurred on Sunday night in Broward County, because over the years we've had, I think, a kind of a superior community policing presence, and we have some very large minority communities that could be subject in these kind of circumstances to a great deal of unrest, and we haven't seen in the past. We don't see the gangs that you might see in other large minority communities, and I think it's a product of a long daily process of communicating in our community, where we have residents that support and trust law enforcement, and so they're ready to communicate without fear of retribution by the bad guys on the street. What I'd like to have happen is, when you have some time, Mayor, I'd like to have the Chief Judge, Judge Tudor, come back and give us kind of an update on how he's worked with law enforcement on the civil citation program, and on persons who actually do get arrested on these minor offenses, and how they're trying to find ways for them, when they can't make bail, to be able to get out on some type of community, some type of probation or pretrial release. Also, I'm going to review again what I thought was a very good plan on a national scale from one of our presidential candidates, Pete Buttigieg, who had the Douglas Plan, and it had a lot of ideas on how systemic racial prejudice might be addressed on many different levels, in an economic way, in criminal justice. So there may be some of those ideas that we can incorporate here at a regional level. So I will look at that. I'm going to ask the county attorney's office to take a look at that plan also, and see what we might be able to apply here in Broward County, so that we do more than just talking. We look at what we can do with our available resources to make for a more equitable opportunity for all persons to be able to be successful. And I really liked your remark when you said, you could be a pro. You don't have to be a pro as a baseball player, basketball, or football. You could be a pro as an engineer or an architect or a doctor or even a lawyer.
That's right. Just a quick response, sir. I've had a multitude of conversations with Chief Judge Tudor, and I can tell you he is on the same accord in understanding that we have to act and do some things a little bit different than what we've done for decades.
Commissioner Udine.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with everything that I'm hearing today, and the presentation that the mayor made, and the statistics in this case really don't lie. The statistics are the facts in this case. And something that Commissioner Furr said in his opening before, I think what we saw the last few days was a spark, and the underlying kindling in my mind, as I've looked at this over the last few years, is just the lack of opportunity that starts from a very, very young age. And when we see different people in different communities, the advantages that they have, when we see the person that can't start reading before kindergarten, and that person, just when you look at it on the scale, falls so far behind. And I think with this COVID issues that we've had over the past few months, I think that's going to be unfortunately magnified as we move forward the next few years, because you have children, and the disparities that you're going to see now are really going to create an even bigger divide. And in my community and where my kids grew up, and when I was mayor up in Northwest Broward and Parkland, I had companies that would come to me that said, we want to do ACT tutoring and SAT tutoring. We want to do it for free in your community. We want to come out and reach out to your community. And I said to them at the time, I understand why you want to do it free in our community, because you know then the people in our community will then sign up for your programs and pay for it. And I'm okay with you doing that, but I want you to do it free in other communities in Broward County and reach out to the sheriff. This was before you were sheriff. Reach out to the sheriff's office and use their community rooms that they have throughout the county in Lauderhill and Lauderdale Lakes, and do those kind of programs there and do it free in those communities too, because those are the people that really need that kind of help. And it was a non-starter, so I'm going to look at that again and hopefully be able to work, you know, with your office to come up with some other plans that we can do in partnership with private sector to give some empowerment. I mean, one thing that I threw out of the box at one point, when I grew up, and like you said, not everyone's going to be a professional basketball, football, or baseball player, but everyone is going to be a professional. I did it on the golf course, and it wasn't playing golf. It was lugging golf bags up and down 18 holes. And I really don't, and I know the weather's hot down here, and I know people can use golf carts, but you could have a golf cart and a caddy. I think we should have programs with some of these golf courses on Saturday and Sundays where minority and people in lower employment zip codes go out there and work at these golf courses. Even if the county had to subsidize some, I think that would be dollars to pay for these caddies for these employments, similar to what we do with the cleaning of the buses with some people that wouldn't get these jobs. I think those are things that would help these students and these people become productive, lifelong citizens. The lessons that they'd get walking 18 holes and just listening to some older people and in a mentor type thing, and earning some money along the way. So I think there's a lot more that we can do, and I agree with you. It's about actions. Prayers are great, but let's put some actions on paper and let's move forward.
Commissioner, one of the things you touched on about the inclusion of our private sector business entities is vital. I will share this with you all in terms of just the intelligence information we've been hearing across the country in terms of some of the different agitators and the ones who want to create conflict. They're changing their mindset and saying, let's not tear down our communities, but let's go into the business areas of wealth, those who are ignoring the issue. And so it is definitely essential for our business entities in the private sector to get involved, because if the notion is that it doesn't impact them because they're of wealth and they live in better communities, well, let's think about what just took place on Las Olas, right? And so we're all interconnected in this. And so it can't just be government, it needs to be private sector as well. And those are some of the things that we're exploring to bring other partnerships into what we're doing.
It happened after Stoneman Douglas. The ACT and SAT company said to Douglas High School, none of your students will have to pay for standardized testing. And I publicly questioned that. I said, it's a great, beautiful, lovely gift, but my daughter was a senior in high school, and I got all the tests that she had taken was credited back to my credit card. And I said, why don't you go into the communities that really need that kind of help? And it's just very difficult. But the private sector is going to quickly learn that if part of the community is not being allowed to engage in the free market the way other parts of the community are able to enjoy that success, there's going to be the problems like we see. So I'm here to work with you and to come up with creative, different ideas, because obviously it's been 400 years. What we're doing probably isn't working that well.
Commissioner Sharif.
Hey, Sheriff.
Hello, ma'am.
You know, we had our budget discussion this week, and during our budget discussion, we talked about some of the issues with our youth, and I think that a lot of the issues that we see where we have disparities in our Black and brown communities with the increase in being arrested and having rap sheets is because we haven't started our programs at the right age to deter that type of activity. You and I talked about implementing a program. I said starting at maybe 15, and then you said, no, I think 12 was the age.
Yes.
And we talked about maybe going into our public school system and educating our kids, giving them the opportunity of financial literacy, because a lot of, we know petty theft is because people are struggling, and we've had generational poverty in our community. And we talked about creating a program that not only where we implemented financial literacy, but opportunities for education and jobs within our community. And I said to you that I wanted to be committed to creating a program so we can start giving our youth something to do after school and something to engage them on a level where we could get all of the companies within our community to offer job opportunities. And I remember you put on the table that you might want to even put them through BSO.
Sure. So I thank you for reminding me of that. The conversation I had with the commissioner was related to the BSO Youth Development Program that we're starting. One of the things I wanted to do was pull monies that we had from both our law enforcement trust fund to establish a outreach program that could bring young folks in starting at the age of 12, catching them early enough in partnership with, for in this particular case, all our predominantly black fraternities and sororities who are already outreaching in these areas but didn't have any type of significant funds to put forth a comprehensive program that would last not just for the summer, but that could last for the whole year. And so far what that is looking like, our team in community service, which is being led up by Major Kevin Granville, is looked at what are going to be our kind of core 5 pillars that we want to focus on in this particular program. And the commissioner brought up a couple, such as financial literacy, career development, internship opportunities, and several others that we're putting in place so that we can start getting these young folks involved and ideally get them, to lateral not only into BSO. We're not just law enforcement, not just fire rescue. We have accountants, we have financial people, we have so many different career opportunities, and build them into the program in a correct manner where they have career opportunities with the agency. So we've already started that several months ago, but I think one of the core things that you and I shared was this can't just be something that's run through trust funds, that show up on a uncertain balance of what we can spend. It should be a line item, something that we put into the budget to get going. Pilot program, we can call it now, but I would love to have the support from the commission where we can put some real money into this thing and really reach out across this entire county. So thanks for the reminder on that one.
Yeah, and I think that's really where we need to go with this, because we have some diversionary programs in place through our court system, but we really don't have that actual program that stops it from occurring.
Right.
And so I wanted to bring forth an item to join with the sheriff to try to set aside something within our budget to support a youth program to deter criminal activity and to educate our youth and keep them on the straight and narrow. We had several instances where we've had children that are, they're 15 and they've got rap sheets that are 5 and 6 pages long. And we see that it's for petty theft, it's for breaking into houses, breaking into cars. And so we need to try to keep those hands from being idle. And so I think that if we really join forces, I think that budgeting, the time for budgeting is the time to introduce new programs like this so that we can vet them out and we can set aside dollars. And I want this to be for a long time, a lifetime, not just for the time that we're here.
That's right.
But to long survive any of us being on this board, something that we can leave as a lasting legacy that we've changed the tide in our community. And so it's not just, we can't just talk about the statistics of racism and inequality no longer. We have to be focused on implementation of projects that move that out of that column and into the positive in the win column. I'm looking for a win from that collaboration.
Commissioner, I'll tell you, I will make sure we expedite our whole operations plan and educational curriculum for how we're going to set this up so we can present it back to the commission timely and get this thing set up as a line item. I really appreciate that support if we can get to that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, we have Commissioner Fisher followed by Commissioner Farr.
Thank you,
I'd
Mayor.
like to speak also, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, and Commissioner Rich.
Thank you, Sheriff, for all you're doing for our community, and thank you, Mayor, for not only this presentation, but what you have done for 9 or 10 years you've been sitting on this dais, and your voice has been heard. And there's been multiple programs that have just been discussed now. Commissioner Sharif, I think, is a magnificent idea, and we need to definitely implement that as soon as we can. Well, let's be a little bit more proactive, and you have goals here, Mayor. I think one some are behind you now on the screen. But I think more importantly, let's go ahead and implement whatever we need to do in an action plan and have the measurables either reported to us once a quarter. So this doesn't just get on the shelf, it just doesn't go away because as we get longer away from Mr. Floyd's death, let's stay on top of it, Mayor, and somehow how can we, whether the sheriff comes once a quarter or someone comes once a quarter to this board and reports to us. These are our goals, this is our action plan, this is the programs that we're doing, what are the results? So it keeps in our face, it keeps us motivated to do what we need to do. So, Mayor, I'd like to see that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Mayor. We're about to embark on what we passed 2 weeks ago with providing money for the racial bias training is really a kind of a landmark thing to try to do for this large of a police department.
Yes, sir.
I don't know of any other, maybe there's been other ones that have tried this to this degree, but I don't know of others. And I've watched the Children's Services Council has been implementing these throughout the county. And every time it's one of those game changers that, people really have to look at. It's a 2-day workshop at the time. The one thing I want to make sure is, and I don't know if it's should take place at the workshop because usually everybody's head's kind of blown from having to go through the whole thing. But at the end of that, we need to be asking ourselves, how do we know if it's successful? And some of those statistics that you're putting up there should be our benchmarks. Those things like police contact and interaction, arrest, incarceration. But the other thing is those tools that come with that need to be utilized on those things like your professional standards.
Yes. Committee.
Because that's where the rubber hits the road on many of these things. And and I know that a lot of times, as you mentioned, that sometimes people get exonerated when they probably shouldn't. And when we saw that policeman with his knee on George Floyd, we know that he didn't feel like he was going to have any repercussions there.
That's right.
When someone is that free to be that bold, to feel like there's no repercussions, something is way off. And they've been given a carte blanche that the social contract that we all live under does not allow, or should not allow.
That's right.
So when that takes place, and do we have a date for when that is? Because this is big. This training is big.
Sir, if I can just expand
and I know when we passed this, we did it fairly quick and we didn't go into
the details.
A large discussion about it. But this is a major event.
Sir, it is huge.
Yeah.
Just to give you some more facts behind what your assumption was, there hasn't been an agency in the state of Florida to mandate racial equity and implicit bias training for over 1,000 plus law enforcement officers. And this will also go into our Department of Detention and every aspect that we can as we continue to expand this out. It's my goal not to just have it for law enforcement officers and first responders, but I'd like to say we're the first agency to have 5,700 people to go through this entire training and really establish a national type of network for what should be done in a public safety organization.
Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing all these things up, Mayor. This is a multi-pronged thing. As you're talking about with education, opportunities, programs, and there are some really good programs that the CSC is already doing that have outputs. The money I think we should be thinking about is our own Children's Services Board to help fund some of those programs that you're talking about. That's a place where that can come from, because they're already dealing with juvenile justice, et cetera. And it could be one of those places. But the one thing I don't want us to forget about, Mayor, and you're talking about the deficits I don't want us to forget about the assets, because there are tremendous assets in the community. When you build a community from the inside out, it's a whole different ballgame if you're looking at it from a point of victimhood as opposed to strength. And there's a lot of strengths, there's a lot of assets that we have to build upon. And I think we should be making mention of those at the same time. when we can. That's all.
And
Thank you, sir.
okay, Commissioner Ridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and for bringing this discussion forward. I know that Kim Campbell is on the line, but I'm going to say a few things, and then I'm hoping she will pipe in, since she is one of the architects of our Dismantling Racism initiative, which is what we've been talking about. It is, I believe, what enabled us to win the Robert Wood Johnson Culture of Health Prize this year, with over 200 applicants from across the country. This initiative is really a testament to Broward's commitment to equity and social justice issues. It is a county-led initiative with partners, as was mentioned, the Children's Services Council, the Broward County School Board, our child welfare system. We have a whole range, and actually Broward County Sheriff's Office was there at the, I believe, at the initial concept. But this commitment by, and I want to thank you, Sheriff Tony, this commitment by BSO, especially given in light of what has gone on, this tragedy and the raw opening of the fact that we still have systemic racism in our society, as we all know. This really is going to be, I think, a big boost to this initiative. As I mentioned, this was launched a number of years ago with community partners. Thousands of people within government agencies, schools, social service providers, faith-based organizations, businesses have gone through a training, and it's not an easy, it's a difficult conversation about racism that's really about changing policies and practices in our community. So I think we have made an excellent start with this, but it needs much more expansion. And I think this commitment by the sheriff is just the first step in that expansion. The Broward School Board has actually employs equity liaisons now in all of its schools. And so you can see that this dialogue and training is beginning to permeate the county. But it is just an amazing initiative. And I do want to say that Kim Campbell and Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer both have made tremendous commitments to this. I also want to just mention that I think that we need to look at this broad kind of a concept. Individual programs are good. We have many of them. We need more. But this gets really to the crux of it, I believe, in terms of making sure that we're going out into the community and helping to change, address the structural and institutional racism that exists. The things that I think we need to look at, I mean, obviously there needs to be legislative reform. I'm looking at the things that Mayor Holness had put up. Legislative reform, local activism, education is incredibly important. And the one thing that really is, I think, critical, we're coming up on elections, both local, state, and national, and voting for people who will commit themselves to helping to dismantle the toxic culture of racism that still exists in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sheriff, you and I had a conversation yesterday, and you talked about probably working to lead, to engage the cities that you don't represent as a body. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll circle back. This is only going to be effective if this is a joint effort across this entire county. It can't be a divide when we're talking about dismantling systematic and institutional racism, providing more equitable opportunities. Everyone needs to be involved. I am going to take this back. I've already had preliminary conversations with every chief as to uniting and making sure we stand within our community to reduce any type of conflict out here related to police brutality. But my position is whatever it takes to ensure that these training opportunities are available for those municipals who may not be able to afford it, that we stand this thing up and not have finance be an excuse for not participating for any agency or for any municipal that just can't find the resources. I think for the type of training that we're talking about doing is just as essential, if not more essential, than the tool belts that I have wrapped around my hip. We in law enforcement, the one fundamental tool we use is communication. We're talking to people every day, we're engaging in conversation, we're trying to de-escalate. So if we can invest millions of dollars on training centers, firearms, ballistic vests, then we need to start investing millions of dollars in this particular program and many others that are going to reduce the conflict from killing people or arresting individuals unnecessarily.
Thank you very much. And I do appreciate you coming in and being here and being a part of this presentation. I look forward to continue working with you into the future to really change and empower our communities that have been left behind, because in doing so, when prosperity reaches those who have been left out of prosperity, it reaches everyone. I'm going to quickly run through the rest of the slides because we got time certain at 10:30 and we have a work budget at 12:30. So again, Sheriff, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you all for your time and
I
the
commend you for
inclusion.
the work you're doing. Tremendous work, powerful.
Thank you.
If I may continue with the slides and go through quickly. And what I've heard from all of you pretty much is that there needs to be more done. What I'd love to be able to do based on the input, Commissioner Ryan wanted Chief Judge to come in. Commissioner Udine want to go back and get some tutoring programs done and possibly some partnering with golf courses. Commissioner Sharif wants to expand on literacy after school program and financial programs. And Commissioner Fisher would like to see us have actual goals set and use a baseline to move forward. Commissioner Furr also want to see that, also want to see that done. Also want to see that done with expansion of the implicit bias, but also to bring the assets that we have in the community, and certainly Commissioner Rich want to see the concepts of broad changes done, and yes.
So I spoke to a chief of police without saying his name.
Yeah.
I spoke to a chief of police in Broward County without saying his name, and he was talking to me. The big problem he believed was that we really need to make change with our state laws, and a lot of our state laws don't allow people to be held accountable. Let's put it that way, and so I think it would be in our interest to find out what kind of amendments we can propose and use our people that we hire to lobby and to move forward. So if you would add that, my suggestion would be to seek changes in our state laws.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I know we have a couple of the time certain items that we need to do. Let's see. Okay, if we can let's run through the slides, please. Staff, can you put up the rest of those slides? Let me just quickly go through them. We're at,
So you're on the next one.
yeah. Are we all right? I'm looking down here. So let's look at the economic side of things, what we can do. In terms of supporting black-owned businesses. And we had a program before where we had preferences. We were sued and we weren't able to pursue that anymore. But part of what we could look to do again, Ms. Henry, and I talked about it a few times, is to probably go back and do the disparity study. I know we did one when I just got here in 2010. It was done, reported in 2011. We weren't collecting the data that we could utilize to get things done. So that's something that we might want to look to do. And again, here's a big piece of what needs to happen in my mind, and I've been pushing for this all the time I've been here and even before I got here, is if you want to balance many of these issues, you've got to look to poverty and look to opportunities. And the Sun Sentinel actually had an article in 2010, 2011, I think the ending of 2010 or early 2011, that said if we were to break the glass ceiling for minorities and women in the area of entrepreneurship, we could grow our economy by $2 trillion. McKinsey did a more recent report that said if we were to end the wealth gap within our country, we could grow our economy by over $1 trillion. If we really take the measures and steps, everyone's going to benefit from it. So we want to make sure we're supporting black business. The Black Chamber of Commerce that I'm a founding member of, that's doing some good work out there. In terms of employment, we've got to look to work with that also. And I know the Alliance has a program, and I'm grateful they call it Prosperity Broad, because that's my whole goal. This year, COVID kind of took a little bit of the steam out of what I was looking to do in terms of putting together a 2050 plan for Broward, one community moving forward together with prosperity for all. That's my theme for my year as mayor. But we saw what happened with COVID. We weren't even able to have a strategic planning meeting this year. So apprenticeship programs, and Vice Mayor Geller has got that. I met with some folks this week that we can work with a little bit more. We've worked with OIC to put in place that hard-to-hire program. That's something that's working that we need to build on. Let me give you a place that concerns me greatly. From the days I got to Lauderhill in 2004. And in Lauderhill, we had 106 firefighters, predominantly black city. And only 4 of those firefighters were black. When I got here in 2010, the sheriff's office, close to 800 firefighters, only 26 black ones. There's something systemic there that's stopping that. The city of Fort Lauderdale, by the way, is on a consent decree for 30 years to increase their numbers from less than 10% to 20%, because that was what was reflective of the population when that consent decree, federal consent decree, was put in place. Guess what? They still haven't done it, even with 2 black chiefs. So when the system is rigged and set up in a certain way, how do you break through unless you really break it down? And unfortunately, what we see on the street is an attempt to break, but it doesn't work from that side. People has to be vocal, to hold us accountable, to protest, yes, but not to destroy. So that's something that we need to look to do also, to increase that. And skill training, vocational training, and the surtax dollars ought to be a tool that we utilize. We're going to have $16 billion over the next 30 years. That must be a place. And I know some cities are already talking about they don't want to meet the 30% goal. Listen, I'm not going to vote for nothing that doesn't have it in there at all. And I think that we should probably have some rightful and righteous indignation from the community, and I'll lead that if I have to, against any attempt to not follow through on what we promised the people of Broward County when we voted for this tax, which is regressive and affect poorer people more than it does wealthy people, because it's more of a higher percentage of their income compared to higher income people. Home ownership is a major piece also. That's a stabilizing factor. That's a generational wealth gap builder. Change home ownership, and you change your wealth, because that's something that someone can pass on to their children. create some businesses. That's something they can pass on to their children. A job is good, but those are the two items last lifetimes and beyond. So what I'd like to see us do, and we saw through COVID-19 the issues with health disparities that exist, and I'm rushing through here, is that we put a workshop on, and I'd like to have, or if there's any disagreement with that, probably for end in June. I know we have our last meeting on the 16th, but I'd love for